Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Sustainable Commodities podcast, a podcast to help people navigate the ever-changing world of sustainability and sustainable commodities. I'm Barnaby Patchett, MD of 199 Agency, a marketing agency working in sustainability, and with me
is Judith Murdoch from Murdoch Associates, working in forestry commodities.
And today on the podcast, we welcome Neha Simlai from the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC. The FSC is, of course, one of the world's leading commodity certification schemes that promotes responsible management of the world's forests through certification.
So to start off with, tell us a little bit about FSC and your role there.
Well, hi, and thank you for having me. I've of course heard Judith many times earlier. But the Forest Stewardship Council, as you know, is a large international not-for-profit dedicated to promoting a responsible management of the world's forests. So we're really working across the world in multiple geographies since our inception in 1994. And we've grown over this period to become one of the most respected and widespread forest certification systems. So I'm extremely humbled and also extremely proud to be able to represent that rich body of just enormous work in all the countries that we represent forests in. I'd like to say also that FSC's pioneering certification system has enabled businesses as well as consumers to choose wood, paper, dissolving pulp, forest-based fiber, rubber, latex, and a host of other forest products made with FSC material that then support responsible forestry or forest management. Effectively, we're a network of members, staff, certificate holders, promotional license holders, as well as responsible consumers. So that's the ecosystem in which I operate, and I am the head of market development for the FSC in the Asia Pacific region. We've been active in the APAC region since the early 2000s, and the regional team has been set up in Hong Kong in around 2011. When we were setting up, we decided that we wanted to be in a sort of trade hub, which would aim then to accelerate our mission to balance environmental, social, and economic interests, while also driving demand for responsible forest stewardship. We have one regional office here, 4 national offices in China, Australia, Malaysia, as well as in Japan. And we have representatives in India, Indonesia, Chinese Taipei, Korea, New Zealand, Thailand, and Vietnam. So yeah, that's who I am.
Wow.
And yes, wow, it's quite a big remit then.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always think about FSC, and I make that fatal mistake, is I just think it's timber, but it is quite complex. How, as a certification body, do you cover all those different aspects of trees? So let's focus on rubber, perhaps to make it easy. How do you certify rubber, and does it sit with the rest of the certification, or is rubber an individual certification in its own right?
Well, interestingly, yeah, and I'm glad you brought up rubber, because Asia is at the global lead for rubber production, and we don't have a separate certification for rubber. So that's not how we do it. It's not a commodity specific certification. It's 10 principles and criteria which sort of govern the FSC certification system. And forests across the world are certified against those principles and criteria. And we're constantly, putting some of those up for public discussion as well as for feedback. We're innovating on the system, but the principles and criteria are sort of the foundation of what we think of as good forest management practice. So all forests within the system, or plantations or forest management units, will have similar sort of approaches in how they are certified.
Yeah.
But I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, no, it does. And then your auditors, so they do the principles and criteria, but they also audit further down the supply chain, so go into a sawmill and things like that. Do you want to just describe that next section?
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I was to give you a sense of it, the forest management certification covers about 11 million hectares in the Asia Pacific region, which could include rubber, but could also include tropical timber, but might extend to a whole host of other commodities which come out of those forests. So the forest management system really speaks to the forest part of it. Then what Judith started talking about is what we call the chain of custody certification, which is everything that then speaks to materials that are changing legal ownership and are reaching from the forest into the market or the retail shelf or even the individual consumer. So any company involved in the processing of transformation of certified products, for example, from the forest, this could be a manufacturer or a repackager or even a pack splitter, or someone who's relabeling even, then has to own FSC COC certification, which is the chain of custody certification. As of January, we have about, almost 35,000 active certificates in the region, in the Asia Pacific region. So that's how big the system is and how widely recognized it is.
And what are the sectors that you see kind of FSC growing in, especially on the market side?
I mean, we started talking about rubber, and for me, I find that as a fascinating story because it's not just a forest management story. It's also it's also a smallholder story in the Asia Pacific context. More importantly is the story of sneakers, which are all the rage everywhere. Eco-sexy is the rage everywhere, and much of eco-sexy comes from virgin forest fiber or virgin forest product. And there's rubber, but there's also fiber that can be certified, which goes into sneaker manufacturing. So again, I get really excited about rubber as a value chain, but I think we also have immense growth in the furniture supply market. So from the Asia Pacific point of view, there's production as well as processing, which are big drivers of what we do as FSC in this region. And then there are also demand markets coming up. So for me, all of it is exciting because there's Japan, Korea, and Australia, New Zealand, which really speak to the demand side of things, which really speak to how certification and certified products are seen by the retailer or the end consumer. So parts of those are, I mean, it's exciting, but I see that's where it's growing. So if I was to break it up really, it would be from a value chain perspective, there's rubber and tropical timber, which would be extremely exciting. From a big value chain perspective, of course, there could be furniture or forest-based fiber that we derive from that. From a country perspective, I think we have Southeast Asia, which is Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, which are extremely exciting markets from production and processing perspectives. I can't ignore China and India just because of the sheer volume of trade that they drive. And then from a demand perspective, there would be Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand.
The FSC logo is something that many consumers see. And how do you think you're going to drive that in the future?
Well, my main mandate is to drive it from niche to norm, and I'm, I also think that it's so much because it's not just one logo. I mean, effectively, there are 5 registered trademarks that FSC owns. It is the Forest Stewardship Council, so the name itself. The abbreviation FSC, then the FSC tick tree logo, which you see behind me, as well as the full text of Forest for All Forever. So all of those really come together and they're quite well recognized. I mean, when I look at some of our promotional license holders in the region, I think we were up to about almost 300 and over 320 last count. And we see some of the biggest names wanting to use that. So I see a lot of interest from industry with that. So tech companies will write to us, gaming companies are writing to us Extremely proud that K-pop bands are using Blackpink used FSC certified material for their album release. And I can't help but reflect on the fact that it must be driven from more than just a need to showcase sustainability commitment. I suppose it comes also from the fact that more and more consumers in the Asian context are recognizing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've seen increasing more recently?
Yes, for sure. In the Asian context, I've lived and worked in multiple country contexts, including India and Bangladesh, where there wasn't really a presence or a need for certification or credibility at the back of a label, for example. But I see now that more and more people are interested in making their own individual level commitment, and which means that the end consumer is really driving demand, which means that the retailer, and therefore working backwards through the chain of custody, I think there would be a shift. Do I see Asia at the helm of that demand yet? Perhaps not, but we're hoping we get there. At sheer volumes, I see no reason why.
Yeah, fair enough. In terms of that changing demand, I guess, how are you kind of innovating at the FSC? So what's new in the region since you joined, and how do you see the general market uptake?
So we see that exponential growth coming through right about now. In terms of the innovation, we did a really, really cool a capsule collection last year with a Hong Kong-based young designer who used certified forest-based fiber, yarn, fabric, as well as garments. So the capsule collection had a range of garments. She designed it here, she manufactured here, and then she showcased even at the Paris Fashion Week. So this is the first time that we got something that we could touch, feel, and see. Oh, okay. So this is forest for fashion as well. So that was a cool thing that we did, and we did it last year. The other thing that I thought was a good reflection of how FSC is innovating within the system is our commodity focused roundtables that we're doing in the Asia Pacific region. We did one last year called the Changemaker series for rubber, which was in Thailand, the obvious choice for all things related to rubber. But we took brands into the field to understand and experience what it meant to be an FSC certified smallholder. And of course, there were Chatham House roundtable discussions, which also enabled brands to sort of learn from each other's commitment, both the sort of the prizes as well as the pitfalls of what would work. And so it's helping us drive commitment in the region and for sourcing from the region.
Yeah. And smallholders, such a big thing in timber. I mean, we previously met through palm oil, but again, how important are smallholders in the overall world of timber?
Well, I mean, for us, they're one of the key pivots of whatever we do. So we've developed and launched over the last 2 years the Regional Forest Stewardship Standard for Smallholders. We call it the RFSS, and we've executed and implemented it in 4 countries in the Asia Pacific region, including India, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And part of that is to make the certification easier for smallholders who typically own less than 20 hectares. And the land serves as their main source of income. And to exclude them from a system because it is complex or it's only meant for a certain volume or for a certain amount of money, felt that it was it could be reworked in a better way, in a better model for at least Asian communities. So again, that is part of the innovation that we're doing. That we're not only driving niche to norm with brands, we're also doing it as something that we work on the production side, and we're also trying to do it on the demand side. So yeah.
So what are the barriers there that the smallholders face in terms of getting certified? Is it cost? What are the things that are stopping them?
I think at this point in time, there's it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because unless there's demand, the smallholder will hold back from taking on certification and guaranteed demand or guaranteed price premium, and if there isn't, then it's a very difficult showcase to the brand, because for most forest-based commodities, the time taken for certification as well as to get the final product might be a bit long. So I think that's the main issue, but we're seeing early success with the RFSS. So yeah, so hoping for the best.
The smallholder, those challenges aren't unique, obviously, to the FSC. It's something that we hear time and time again. Going back to talking about palm. Yeah, it was a very similar conversation when we spoke to the RSPO and at their roundtable. So yeah, I think you're probably in good company when it comes to addressing that challenge.
Yeah. We hope to be effective in the way that we're thinking about it, and definitely, we work in parallel with multiple parts of the FSC system, so the policy and standards unit, as well as the trademark unit. So everyone's sort of coming together to make sure that this is easy to understand, not just for the end consumer, but also for the smallholders and the suppliers.
Yeah. So that leads nicely on to say, what do you think about the EUDR and smallholders?
Given where the complexity of regulation is at, not just in the EU, but also globally, also looking at how trade is being negotiated and how trade treaties are being negotiated, how tariff is being thought through. I think the main role that FSC is playing is to help our certificate holders in demystifying some of this extremely complex policy writing, but also helping them with step-by-step guidance in terms of how they then can approach EUDR-like regulation. And I don't think it just stops at EUDR, because there is other regulation that will follow. And more of our certificate holders should be future ready in that sense. We're using technology. We're using webinars at this point. We're also using one-on-one meetings to help people walk through the process with us. And then while it's not a green lane that FSC is building, it is very much one of the best ways to address sustainability commitment and therefore deforestation related risk management.
Well, anyway, we thought EUDR might be one of the biggest talking points for 2025, and then someone came along, and obviously the big news for the year is Trump. What do you think his impact's going to be on the world of sustainable forest risk commodities?
Traditionally, in the APAC region and also everywhere else, we've used U.S. and U.S. trade policy as a sort of go-to goalpost to understand how the world is working. But maybe we can also rework some of our own indicators. Can it be increased demand for sustainable products? And we just started talking about it. It could be the use of technology, which is like drones or blockchain, which is changing the way that you could think of polygons, for example. So we could use all of that also as a measure of success. In addition to stricter regulation and collaborative approaches from other parts of the world. So maybe that's one way of looking at it. But overall, there are challenges, of course, and we're all sort of waiting and watching how this plays out, especially in the Asian context. We're also seeing interesting diversification of supply chains. We're seeing companies looking at new areas, which presents an opportunity in defining or redefining certification impacts to talk to the same bits of smallholder stories that I was mentioning. If you see diversification, it's happening mainly in countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, even Cambodia, Philippines, and Laos. So for us, those are also hubs of biodiversity conservation. Those are also hubs of socioeconomic benefits that could go downstream. So I think maybe this is not just as bleak as we think it is. At least I hope it isn't. But we're making sure that we stand committed to forests for all forever.
Mm-hmm.
So by that, how much of a footprint has FSC in the US in terms of, or is it very much about Asia?
We have a dedicated team that works in North America. What I can speak to is the fact that a lot of the US based brands are still talking to us. So for me, that's an interesting indicator because they're some of the big, and again, unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to say who, but you start seeing the FSC logo more prominently across US-based brands, and that has to be an indicator of a growing interest in the work around forest certification, as well as sustainability commitments. So yeah,
I think going wider, I've seen a lot of doom and gloom, obviously, from the sustainability professionals, and what I tend to come back to if I'm looking for positivity is that last time he was in office, sustainability didn't stop progressing. To hang the entire movement on one man's presidency is to give him far too much power, I think, and to kind of give up that agency that everyone has themselves, that nation states, that different parts of the world have. You don't have to do exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I find it. I think about, reflect on what we've done and built out as FSC, and over the last years we've contributed to 11 of the 17 SDGs. So it can't just only be one person driven as a narrative across the world. That gives me hope.
Yeah, no, definitely. So where was FSC formed? This is a really
Oaxaca in Mexico, and different parts of it.
Interesting, because I mean, certainly again, RSPO, a lot of the UK retailers and others came together, and obviously it was KL based, etc. So it was just, I just suddenly thought, was it a European thing? Which I would say RSPO probably got a bit of a kickstart in Europe, but is firmly planted in Malaysia and Indonesia. So it was just more my own ignorance, actually.
Oh, so the interesting part is, and I studied this while I was preparing for my interview with FSC. Because I'd always perceived as someone who's worked at WWF, I always perceived as FSC being, timber mainly, or, forests really. But it's also very much about indigenous people and their rights. It's also about ILO standards. So for me, that whole piece came together because I read that we started in Oaxaca, and that would then make sense in tying it a little bit together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the bit that potentially gets missed is the, FSC, the label. I think that is one of the greatest things that advantages you've got is so many consumers recognize that label compared to a lot of other certification bodies where it's not recognized. And then equally, it just thinks it's about deforestation rather than a bigger picture.
Yeah, I think the initial idea and also the name, because it's Forest Stewardship Council, everyone associates it mainly with forests, but not so much with forest communities or suppliers who work in the forests, or loggers who have a pivotal role in how forests are really being managed. So I think that's where we're all growing, and we're also trying our level best to build a better understanding for FSC as a brand, but also enabling the standard to do better.
Yeah, because that standard, I mean, in the UK, if I pick up any paper or if I pick up any wood products, I'm likely to see that FSC these days. You know, in terms of how Judith just mentioned, consumers know it. I'd put it up there, probably just below something like fair trade in the UK, but as a standard, it's very strong. What's that like over in Asia Pacific?
So when I fly, at least the national carrier in Hong Kong and a few others, my boarding pass is on FSC paper. Most of the bigger retail spaces have some packaging material which is definitely certified. We also have enough volume now of conversation going on at spaces in some of the biggest expos and exhibitions where you will see a very strong FSC presence. A lot of the retailers will typically put out the certificate somewhere on their website to ensure that they're also moving into a space of better market access for themselves. So it's not unrecognizable, but can we do better in Asia Pacific? Absolutely. In terms of brand recognition. But I think in the US and the UK and other parts of the world, we're leading by leaps and bounds. I think more than 50% of global consumers would be close to recognizing the FSC logo.
Yeah, that's pretty big. I mean, that's huge for it. Yeah. So I guess kind of looking at that bigger picture and looking to a hopeful future as we've talked about here, what does the future look like for the FSC?
Our mission, which is to ensure that there are forests for all forever and healthy, thriving, biodiverse ecosystems, which have which ensure that the rights of communities living in them are not impinged upon. People working around those forests have a decent life and livelihood. I think those are the things that we're also striving to do.
Yeah, it's really. I'm quite inspired by some of the things that you've said when the reach of FSC. It is really impressive, and as I've said, just to go back to that label, to have that recognized by consumers.
Great. Well, I think that's a nice place to call it. Thank you very much, Neha, for joining us on the Sustainable Commodities podcast. And thank you for listening, and join us next time.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.